we're gonna start going here soon. Sorry about that. So this is the reality of live TV. We are a one-man shop. We don't have a whole network of people behind us, and I work hard to get it all to you. So thank you all for coming here, and I think we got it all kinked out. I got all these different monitors here. I'm just making sure it's all working. First and foremost, guys, make sure, yes, we are. Thank you. The beard is legit. Thank you. Make sure that you can hear me okay, and then I'm going to bring JJ in with the power of technology, and hopefully that works. JJ and seems like his family too, but you can see me. Thanks, Jeff. And thanks, JJ. You guys can, the audio is good. All right. Woo. Okay. That's one worry. Whew. Okay. And let's see now with the magic of technology. Let me bring in JJ. All right. So can you guys see JJ? He's going to be coming on any second now. Yeah. People see JJ. All right. Oh, this is so crazy. Okay. Well, at least it's working. That's all that matters to me. So guys, while we're doing all this, go ahead, sound off, where you're coming in from. JJ's adjusting his camera. Just sound off where you guys are. Oh, and JJ, just say hi so people can hear you, make sure they hear you okay.
Hey guys, can you hear me? I've seen some Canada guys from Miami. I think there was a guy from Brazil that signed in, so I'm seeing a lot of guys, so it's pretty cool. I don't know if you guys heard me.
Well, we'll find out in a second. We'll see in the chat. All right. Yeah, I think we're looking good here, JJ. You look good. I look good. And people, and Anthony says beautiful. Thanks. All right. Thanks, Tim. Hey, Tim. And sorry you couldn't make the class. It was an awesome class.
So sad for Tim.
Yes. All right. Welcome to the Firearms Nation live show. I'm here with JJ Racaza, who is a phenomenal competitive shooter. Those of you that don't know him, JJ will just give you a brief little intro of his lineage. It's too long. I know he doesn't want me to bore all you with that, but we're going to talk a little bit tonight about his style of teaching and shooting, and then we'll get into your questions. And let's all just say a quick hello to his lovely family. This is being recorded for an audio podcast version, just so you guys know. But we'll get into all your questions shortly. But JJ, who are you with right now?
This is my little boy Kai. Say hi. And then Naya, say hi too.
Hi.
And tell the world, JJ. I mean, you are a world champion. What are you shooting right now?
Right now, I am currently shooting. Oh, excuse me. Hold on. Sorry. I apologize, Kai. Excuse me, guys. Mommy, can you take him, Mom? Kai. Right now, I'm shooting for Beretta, but currently, I don't have the guns yet, so I am shooting open. In open division, I'm shooting Limcat, and in production, I still have Nighttime Foglio. I'm hoping to switch that out very, very soon because I feel like the other gun is a lot more superior with the trigger and technology they've had. And then for limited, it's up in the air right now. Whoever gives me a gun that I can run, because I currently don't own one. So if I see or find one to borrow again for nationals, I will be using whatever that may be.
Okay, and you've basically been shooting all your life, right?
Yes, I started in 1988, and that was when I was 8 years old.
So for those of you that don't know, JJ did a podcast with Firearms Nation. I want to say it was almost a year ago. And it was a really good show. He talked a lot about growing up and shooting and, working with his dad and, earning all those fantastic titles. So I don't want to, it's not boring. I would never say it was boring. But the impetus for this live show, other than just talking with JJ again, was that he actually came down here to Florida for a training class. And I got to tell you, JJ, it was a fantastic class. Some of the people here tonight were in that class, but it really, I mean, I've taken a lot of training, between competition and the tactical world. I've taken a lot of training with a lot of instructors. And guys, JJ puts on a really fantastic class. That's where you say that, yeah, that was a good class. It's okay.
It was a good class, but I don't know. It's nice to hear that, I still get goosebumps every time I hear that, but it's just unreal that people actually like it.
Well, it's one of these things where you've been on both sides of the house, right? A lot of people don't know that you were also working in the federal government, doing training and then actually doing some enforcement.
Yes, correct. Now, a lot of people seem to kind of forget that. Sorry, Kai. Hey, bud, can you go? Sorry, bud. Sorry. A lot of people seem to forget that. Most of the guys, even during my time as a contractor, I just would tell people that I'm a competition shooter, and that would be my background. I wouldn't even say anything about any federal service or anything like that.
And it's like a broken record for a lot of people to hear, but there is a huge nexus between competition shooting and the tactical world, whether it's everyday carry, whether it's law enforcement or military. I mean, the skill set that you get from shooting competition easily carries over into the tactical world.
Correct. It was really apparent, I believe, especially when I was in the, hold on, Kai, please. It was really apparent. I'm sorry, Eric.
It's okay.
It was really apparent when I was in the government, when I was sent out to classes for tactical shooting, advanced application in the real world. And when I was doing that, it seemed like the pistol shooting was very second nature to me, that I would just worry about the positioning, my threats, the non-threats, because that was a big thing between the difference between competition and real world. That there are things that were constantly changing. You had threats and non-threats all together, living in the same scenario. And when my gun had a malfunction, I would be able to clear it, whether it's two-hand or one-handed manipulation, if I was addressing a subject at the same time and all that stuff. So guys would always notice, or at least instructors would always notice that, and they would always whisper or pull me aside and go, where do you come from? What military branch? And what's your background? And I would always just say college degree, and I shoot a little bit in competition. That was all I'd ever say.
And if you can shoot your gun in competition and deal with all that stress, I mean, because we're not getting into gunfights every day. And you actually talked a little bit about that in your class. But some of the concepts of your class that I'd like to share, I'm not going to give away all the milk, but some of the things that were really interesting that stuck out of my mind, first and foremost, was the trigger prep. Now, the trigger prep is pretty much almost, I want to say 90% of what you're teaching. Tell people what your thoughts are on the trigger prep.
I believe it's the most basic form and fundamental that we have to learn in terms of shooting a gun. But what I figured out, at least I was forced to figure it out in the last 8 years or 10 years, that it ties into everything that we do in terms of the sexy stuff in shooting, whether it's shooting on a move or shooting a moving target or shooting a hard target. And if you're able to manipulate that trigger correctly, as we talked about in class, you can execute these shots a whole lot easier. And I've always felt like I would always use myself as an excuse, or at least as a reason, because I did all the sexy stuff since, I don't know, 99. And I was able to pull off a couple of good wins and a couple of close calls in nationals, without even hammering the fundamentals. I just had a lot of holes in my game and stuff like that. And I started focusing on some of the trigger stuff, and I started realizing that my shooting, instead of just feeling like I was stuck on a plateau, I felt like I was starting to exponentially grow. And this started happening around 2011. And it was just a cool turnaround or a corner for me to figure out. And at that time, I was already shooting for almost 20 years, and to figure out that the most basic thing to learn in terms of shooting, the simplest basic platform, was pulling the trigger correctly. And all of a sudden, it was something that I focused on, and I knew I had to share it. So no matter how advanced or how basic the classes are I'm teaching, I always hit that up. And when I'm teaching through military, law enforcement, or competition, I always hit that up. And that's like the one consistent thing that I will always bring up. And even our class was filled with a lot of advanced shooters. I hit it up for at least 3 hours.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing that I noticed. And, I've heard so many people talk about prepping the trigger. And then, like there's certain shots that you don't need to prep the trigger. And I kind of walked away thinking that you pretty much need to prep the trigger all the time. That was, and that's what I've been working on so far. And I'm already seeing success. So I got to thank you for that. And then in addition to prepping the trigger, and we're going to stay on that trigger, no pun intended, but you did a drill where we were moving forward, shooting on the move. And then you had us, once you've reached your point, instead of, you fire your shots when it was like 2, 2, and 2, you wanted us to keep doing it, but just only prepping the trigger. Why was that?
That to me is basically what we ended up doing later on. We expanded it. I call that deficit training. I don't have a better name for it. It's basically taking away the bang and the gun going off, which masks a lot of your deficiencies. And I wanted you to actually focus on the process and the execution of the movement of your trigger finger, and how to manipulate your trigger so it's set up correctly without actually shooting. Because the shooting part is just you making the thought and making the gun happen at the same time. And so what we're trying to do there is eliminate the whole shooting altogether, because that's what masks a lot of our anticipation, a lot of our anxiety that builds in right as we prep the trigger. And by doing that on the move, it shows you that a lot of times if you're not used to prepping the trigger, you will have an AD and you'll actually commit, because most people mistake the prepping the trigger, taking the slack out or anything like that, to a bang, and that means it's ready to shoot. No, you're just getting yourself ready at first. And that's the first step, is to get yourself ready to shoot by taking the slack off. And once you're at the point of at the wall, any more movement after that should be ignition. And that's the only time, or that's when I start thinking about shooting the gun. So by having you guys and forcing you guys to dry fire a loaded gun essentially as you're moving up and down, it's one of those things that I saw a lot of benefit from all my students, including myself, as I went through that whole entire process of trying to figure out how to teach the prep while doing some sort of an advanced drill. Because I feel like shooting on a move or shooting moving targets are the only real advanced, complex skill set that you have to do for our shooting game.
And like you said, I mean, you had to find that right point, because first of all, people don't do this at home. It's dry fire with a loaded gun, but on a range, not in your house, unless your house happens to be a range, which you're lucky. But this was on a range facing, towards the berm with targets. And yes, if you did have an AD, the AD was dead center. It was right on, because you had your sights where they needed to be. But some of the times you would say that you weren't prepping it enough, like you were kind of cheating it. And that's what I think I'm working on. I know some other people were working on that a lot, because you were right there, you were watching our fingers, and you're like, no, you're not doing it. Is it just that people are afraid to commit to getting their finger off and back on fast enough? Was that what you usually see happen?
No, what I see a lot is a lot of people misunderstand what I'm actually talking about prep, right? So a lot of people merge the whole prep and the bang, or at least the gun going off at the same time, and they make it like for instance, to break down the step by step, it's supposed to be reset, prep, and then bang. Most folks that I teach, or at least I've seen videos on YouTube, online, they say, oh, I've been prepping the trigger like crazy. So I sit there and watch them in person, and I see the reset, and then it's a prep bang. So there was no confirmation with the sights as soon as you got rid of the slack. And that right there's an instant disconnect between what you wanted to see on your sights and when the gun was supposed to go off, as opposed to what you saw on the sights after the trigger and any movement has been eliminated, and then a gun going off instantaneously when your sight or when you saw your sights wherever it was, and that's how you essentially leading up to calling your shots correctly on target.
It's interesting too that you brought that up because you didn't seem to stress a lot about calling your shots. A lot of people talk about calling your shots. I don't think you even mentioned it. Maybe you did. I was sleeping, but you didn't really talk about it. I mean, there's a lot that you wrote down on your notes, and I didn't see calling your shots. How come?
I brought it up briefly.
If you're doing everything right, your shots are going to be there. Is that
Correct.
okay?
It's what it is. It's and it came down to Rob Latham a long time ago, right? I use him a lot because he's spoken to me a couple times and tried to guide me throughout my shooting career. And that old man knows secrets, and he basically taught me a long time ago. It's like if you do everything correctly, where your sights are is irrelevant. If you do everything correctly with that trigger, that sights and that trigger, well, that trigger will dictate where your shots will go. And it kind of took me a very long time to figure that out. And I was like, oh, I'll just continue to do whatever I do. But there's some shots that I can't really call. Like I'll throw 4 or 5 shots on a 25-yard partial just because I couldn't call, and I'll end up either getting lucky with 4 shots or 3, or maybe just 1 and then 3 or 4 in the hardcover. And so that was always a hole in my game. And it was just to the point where if I did everything correctly in the trigger and then just watch and confirm my sights for a second, it didn't matter how, as I showed you guys in class, how you jerk or crush that trigger. If you learn how to isolate that trigger finger, that bullet was going where your sights was.
I agree 100%. Because that was my experience in the class. And that's why it kind of opened my eyes to a lot of it. And then something else I wanted that kind of coincided with it because you were talking about it with the prep when we were doing the prep drills was 90-10. And that is another eye opener because it's something that we all do, whether we know it or not, but the conscious part of it, it applied to the trigger prep, it applied to the to the target transitions, it applied to so much of it, and you would constantly say 90-10, 90-10. Where are you? Or are you 99-1? What does that mean?
Basically, I learned that through a non-shooter. She was a sports psychologist, and I learned that from her. And she was like, "Hey, I'm struggling with my shooting and some things, and I need to learn how to speed up, but not actually sacrifice on my accuracy. Every time I speed up, I started to sacrifice a little bit of accuracy, but I've always felt like there was a sweet spot, right?" And she was like, "Okay, what are you trying to do?" And I was like, "Basically, I just want to bring my gun up and shoot 5 rounds on target in 5 seconds, or I think 5 seconds, 5 rounds. Like I should be able to do that consistently and leave it at 1 inch at 30 feet." And she was like, "Okay, first of all, the movement from the table all the way up to that bullseye is your first movement. How does that look like?" And then she, I gave you guys a little drawing, the same drawing that she did for me, and she tied everything into a movement. And then it was like a light bulb moment for me that I realized everything in our game is a movement up to the gun going off. Even the minuscule movement with your trigger finger coming back onto the prep is a movement. And I was like, all right, if I can do and apply the 90%, meaning 90%, I just got to attack it and just be as fast as possible. That's when it's wasted space. I'm not worrying about that. I don't care about being accurate there. I just need to be fast. By the time I get to a position, let's say I'm coming up to a position, I need to start getting myself ready to shoot, meaning one of the things would be getting my gun up so I can start aiming, looking for my sights, and I'm eliminating steps. So by the time I get to the box, all I have left is confirming my sights and then breaking the shot. I know I'm eliminating getting the gun up. I'm eliminating looking for my sights, settling it on target, and then prepping the trigger and all of that stuff. So I'm trying to get that done within the last 10% of any movement. So if it was my trigger, as soon as the gun goes off, the reset and the prep is my 90. So I have to learn how to do that really, really fast. So I'm back on the prep. And then that leaves me with 1% of movement, basically. And that's it. And then that translates to everything that I did, transition from target to target. If it's a wide transition, I have a 90%. I just need to be fast. I can't see my sights at that time. I shouldn't look for my sights at that time. I just need to move my gun from one side to the other as quickly as possible. In the last 10%, when the gun comes into your peripheral, then it becomes priority switches. Now I need to be accurate. I need to look for my sights. I need to get my trigger and all that stuff. And the same goes if you take away the 90%, all you have is 10%, whether you're moving from box to box or target to target, there's no trying to lead with your eyes during a transition. There's no trying to sprint out or drop step as we talked about it in class because you're not trying to accelerate. You're in the 10%, so you have to get yourself ready to shoot. You have to become more accurate. So those are the things that I believe a lot of people are missing. And I felt like it's a movement thing, right? So it was something that I learned from a non-shooter, and I've taken that to heart, and I guess basically taking notes to everything that I've ever done in shooting and realizing that, holy cow, the whole entire shooting is a 90 and 10 somewhere along those lines.
Yeah, and that came from a
A
speed
sports
school,
psychologist.
or
No,
she
that
was
was
a
a
sports
sports
psychologist,
psychologist.
right? But
Yeah.
it was at that speed school that you went to.
No, that was during that time when I was invited in the Olympic Training Center.
Okay, so
Yeah.
even better, the Olympic
Yeah.
Training Center.
Yeah.
Uh, and obviously, you weren't there for shooting.
No. It was just this little stint. I was there. One of those things where you get sent for the government stuff.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
very cool.
So,
Yeah,
and they
just
sent you
literally.
to speed school also.
Yeah, so literally a lot of the things that I've done in my life has just been fortunate because I've been in the right place at the right time, and then I've been able to essentially take advantage or at least see the opportunity to go, how does this apply to me personally? And it's a little bit self-centered or selfish a little bit, but now I'm able to share a lot of my experiences, and it ties into a lot of at least scientific backing, and I didn't have to prove it mostly for myself. I just needed to see how it tied into our game essentially. And then that I was sent to go to learn some footwork and clearing and how to move and manipulate your body, whether you're running a long gun or a short gun in close quarter, close quarter, long distance, whatever shooting, when you're moving in and out as a team or something like that. And that was the purpose for me being sent to this speed school. But I ended up going in there going, I can use everything here for attacking a field course or manipulating myself to a field course. So.
No, it's all good stuff, and yes, you were very fortunate. So before I ask you any other questions, let's reach out to some of these people who've been patiently waiting with some questions. I'm just going to start from what's up in front of me, and then we'll work our way back. But this is should be an easy one. This is from Pete. He says, "JJ, please explain gun up again."
Basically, gun up is, let's just for instance, gun up usually applies to when you're moving from position to position. It's position A, I don't know if you can see me, and then position B. When you run from position A to position B, depending on how far it is, so let's just say it's about 5 yard run, right around the fourth yard, you got 1 yard left or one step to go coming into the position. You're now hitting what's called the 10% zone or the 5% zone or whatever, depending on how hard you're running. That's when you pull your gun up and start indexing that gun, looking through your sights or whatever sights you have, whether it's an optic or an iron sights, somewhat oriented towards the target. It's going to be moving all over the place, and that's when you have to get your gun up so you can start aiming. And then you can start prepping your trigger, because in our sport, if you don't get your gun up and you prep your trigger, you're basically DQ'd.
Yeah, that's true. Seen it happen. There's a fine line between that area and disqualification. And I want to say something. Andy, I see that you're saying this is really good material. Let me tell you, take a class with JJ. I highly recommend everything that he's talking about here. He gets in depth with in his class, and that's why it kind of blew my mind. I just want to get Jay's question out, Jay Clay 94, because he's about to go to bed. I don't know
he's
where
awesome.
He's awesome. Well, I don't know where he works, but
Northeast.
Northeast. Okay, well, I'm up. His question is, JJ, would you talk about the different phases of preparations for a match, specifically the last phase before you go to shoot the match?
Yeah, that's obviously covered in class as well. There are
I
three
remember.
phases. There's the fundamental and foundation stage, which is phase one. Phase two is drilling and exploration, essentially failing and pushing your body, finding new 100%. And then phase three, which is about, I normally classify it about 1 week, meaning 1 to 2 weeks away from a big match. That means three practice sessions or about 1,500 rounds away from a major match. That's when you go right into execution, and you're going right basically to what I call overloading your system to just doing what you do in matches. So basically, if I want to perform and shoot really good, basically I'm gonna say 95% of my shots are good. I mean, I don't want to. Bad shots are considered pickup shots, deltas, and any penalty shots. Those three things. I want to fire 95% of my shots out of 1,500 without any of those three things I just mentioned. And if I can do that for 1,500, that will set up my mindset, and that will set me up with the confidence that I'll go, and then I'll go into the match going, giving me all this boost in confidence. I know I just did it for 1,500 rounds and in different setups and three different practice sessions. I can probably do the same thing now, continuing it right leading up to the match. And so that just, to me, it, instead of like trying to push yourself the day or the week before the match, there's no sense in doing that because you're really not getting any faster at that point. You should have done that 2-3 months ago. And if you start exploring or still pushing and making those mistakes a week or two before the match, you'll walk into the match with more questions than answers. If you're just exploring and basically doing what you can, staying within your capability, and just sharpening what current edge you have or corner, and rounding those corners off and smoothing it all out, you'll walk into the match with a different mindset. You'll have the most confidence. You'll know it'll take a while. It won't just be overnight, but you'll start believing in yourself in your training sessions that it's actually working, as opposed to constantly training random drills and pushing and going to the match going, oh my gosh, I don't know what speed this is. No, you should already know at what rate you should be firing those targets or whatever targets presented to you, and how you can engage whatever partial target they're giving you.
And all this, like I said, is covered in his class. And if somebody wants these notes, I saw earlier that Anthony is selling them. So hit up Anthony, and I'm sure he's going to give you a good deal on it. Maybe a little bit cheaper than taking the class. But you know, the nice thing about taking the class is that JJ is right there, and he can correct anything that you need. You're hearing it. You can answer your questions right, as it's happening. So thank you, Anthony, for selling his stuff. I can see why you took the targets. Another question. This is from BTSPEI. I don't know how I would pronounce that. But he's asking, for new shooters, what could they specifically do to improve their movement during a long stage?
So there's a couple of things, right? So I don't like to cover the 90%, meaning the sprint from one position to the next. That is something that you're ingrained with, depending on unless you're a junior shooter, like way young, 13, 14, maybe I can tweak a little bit of how you run and your running form and all that stuff. And I think you'll grow into that. But most of us that are in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, if I try to change the way you run or sprint, that's something that I really don't address, because I feel like I'm just going to take 2, 3, 4 steps back, and then your gain, or at least what I call your return of investment, will be very slow, and you won't see it for at least a year or two unless you focus on literally getting your form up. But what I do is I tell my class that there's 3 places for you to lose time or gain time. It's your exit from a position, it's your sprint in the middle, and it's your entry. So if you focus on how you're exiting a position, that's where a lot of people lose their time. A lot of people don't, majority of shooters don't, or are already in focus of how to get in a little better. I just feel like there's some techniques that are a little bit off there. Like one of the things that we talked about was coming into with your rear foot into the position, as opposed to using that as your braking foot before you come into position. And then so now you're stepping in with your lead foot, and then you're coming in with a heel toe, as opposed to kind of like the side of your foot or whatever. We talked about that. That entry right there will make your shooting, at least gun and sights, a little bit more stable sooner. So that will be the thing that I'll talk about, the exiting and learning how to enter correctly.
And not to sound like a broken record, but if this is an advertisement for taking JJ's class, go to his website. I mean, he's teaching almost like every weekend. If there's not a match, get into a class with him. Maybe take a class and then take another class, because it's all good. Something else that you talked about, and then I'll get back to the questions, but something else that you talked about were attack and control. And that was something very different. I'd never heard that before in terms of targets. And then again, when you tie it all together, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So attack and control, what are they?
I would say so. I guess I'll tell you the whole story how that came about. 2017, I went to the Phil. I went. 2017 was basically the first year I came back to shooting seriously. I had to kind of give it up around end of 2015, all the way to middle or July of 2017. I was here in Vegas starting a business, Magna Sports, and then I was here alone with the two kids, and my wife was still in the East Coast running around, being a federal agent, so she was traveling a lot, and I would see her more on the news channels or anything like that than I would see her in person. So I didn't have much time to shoot. But 2017, I started shooting, but that was me transitioning from production to open. And when I got back to open, I remember losing all my speed. And I went to a match in the Philippines, and I went to go shoot against one of the top shooters in the Philippines. He's Edsel, and then a buddy of mine, Jerome, and we were squatted together. And I saw how accurate Jerome was, and I said, I need to be a little bit more controlled and accurate like him. And then I saw how crazy fast Edsel was, and it kind of reminded me of like a guy like Casey, who's just didn't give a care how small, how big the poppers or targets were. He was going to go full blast on it, and this guy was connecting. And here I am, or he would throw 4 or 5 pickup shots on a popper, and I would throw maybe one on a stage, and we'd have the same exact time. So I'm like, I cannot be at this speed. I have to learn how to become faster. So that year, at the end of the year, I started figuring out I need to get control, and I already had that, and I was like, so I need to be faster. And now where can I be faster? And I couldn't pull the trigger faster than I currently could. It's besides wasting a lot of rounds of doing build drills and all that stuff. I didn't really see much benefit on that, and I started breaking it down to shooting. I'm going to gain hundredths of a second, and so I said if I move correctly, I'm going to be able to gain a tenth of a second here or there. So I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of shooting to gain my movement, and then so I started breaking down shooting, and then I said it's on the transition. This is where I'm going to lose a lot of time and gain a lot of time. So how do I do this? And then I started identifying targets. So these targets right here are attack, where I'm only going to use my sights and I'm going to pull the trigger as fast as I can, whatever fast may be. It's all relative to the shooter. And then those targets that are beyond that I can't do that automatically becomes a control. Now I'll need my sights and my trigger. Where when I say trigger, I'm going to need to prep a little bit. How I prep, how much I prep and stop on the wall depends on the proximity of the target and what I can get away with. And it took a little bit of experimenting, and that's when I started thinking, I'm like, all right, these targets I'm going to attack like hell. I'm going to break some of the rules that I followed for the last 20-something years. One of the things that Rob Latham used to tell me, like I shared with you guys in class, was any targets that are 7 yards or 10 yards and in is free alpha. If it's an open target, get an alpha on it. I'm like, okay, cool. So I used to do that and follow that, and I couldn't gain anywhere from there. And I was like, well, I can't gain speed there because everyone's just getting alpha. I'm going to speed it up. And I didn't realize the difference between trying to speed up, and I didn't know what that meant. And so I figured I'll just do a test, and I'll just shoot all alpha as fast as I can, and then I just decided instead of shooting for the alpha, I'll just shoot center of the target as fast as I can. And the results in terms of time was huge after 10 reps of it, but the results on disparity between my scores was very minimal. And that's when I realized, like, all right, I'm going to focus more on attacking these targets, willing to give up a little bit here or there. And I just got to be honest with myself in terms of what division I'm shooting, whether it's major or minor, how far I can really attack a target. And really, I started out with an open, and at that time, I was, number 2 in the world, 2017. I started out at 10 yards was my attack target. Anything beyond that, I was going to prep or at least feel the trigger of some sort.
Yeah, that Mark says that was his biggest takeaway from the class. I agree with that. That and the prep were eye-openers. And like I said, I had learned to prep for many years, but I never, ever approached it the way that you did it. And right now, my dry fire pretty much is prepping the trigger. I just work. I'm
so happy to hear that.
Half hour a day just sitting there prepping that trigger, seeing how far I can get it, seeing how fast I can get it, and looking forward to applying that to a match. We're more than halfway through this, guys. If you guys that are listening could do me a favor and just hit that thumbs up button, let YouTube know, specifically because right now, anything firearm related is under attack. But the more it sees some positivity, I don't think it's going to make any difference to them. I think they just don't like us to begin with. They just tolerate us. But it would definitely help the cause, get it aware for other people who are interested in shooting to eventually see this. Getting back to the questions, I did see a question from Anthony that I thought was kind of interesting. And he said, What do you think of people's different opinions on how to set up a trigger? Defined wall or rolling break? And when he's saying rolling break, I think he means breaking an optic or his gun.
So yeah, there's a couple of people, there's a couple of different styles out there. I think that's all shooting preference. I like a solid wall. And when it's a solid wall, I can prep the trigger, and when I move the trigger, it's going off. There's no other movement that I have to deal with there, messing up my timing. Because I'm huge with that, right? I talked about it in class where when I want the gun to go off, I want to go off right now. I don't want to beat any more movement. I don't need to feel any more movement. I need it to go off instantaneously, and that's how I shoot. Certain people do like a rolling trigger because they just can't prep hard enough. My personal opinion on that is I believe they're just not patient enough to work on their prep, and they're being a little lazy, and they're just trying to use that as an excuse that they can control the trigger or shot like that. But I can almost tell you this with I'm hoping to prove it with some other people. Those guys right there will have a hard time shooting 50-yard targets, consistently shooting alphas, and calling their shots on some of the hard shots because they're not able to prep the trigger correctly, or at least manipulate the trigger correctly, because their timing is always off. There's no consistency of when the gun's supposed to go off. I think they're kind of going off of by feel and instinct, and if you do that enough, you will get good at it. But I feel like you're going to hit a plateau sooner than you would if you did learn how to manipulate that trigger correctly.
Very interesting. Patrick Grundle wants to know if you ever thought about putting material about getting in shape for IPSC and or workout programs for shooters. I mean, people do know you as a very fit guy, so I can understand why he's asking that question.
It's so funny. I get a lot. I would say probably about 50 messages a week on social media platform, any of them, Facebook, Instagram, or even Twitter, which I'm not very active in, about physical fitness in terms of shooting. I don't. My workout has always been. I started working out really hard, and I think correctly, when I started contracting, and then I was working with a bunch of military folks, and they showed me how to really destroy my body and kill it, and find a way to push through it, right? And once I got to see that, and then I got a little smarter in terms of my working out and all that stuff. A lot of my workout was because I work out so hard because I was in fear of, this is stupid, but I was always in fear of ever getting in an encounter when I was working for the DHS, maybe making an arrest or whatsoever, or an event happens, I die or get my ass kicked and never get to see my family, because I was tired, I wasn't in shape, or I just wasn't in the right fighting form. So in my time during DHS, I didn't have kids, I didn't have a wife. I would work out at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. My TL was a Delta guy, so he mentored me, and so he would show me how to program certain things and look for things while we're running and pushing ourselves at a high heart rate and identify certain things surrounding. That was like one of the trainings. And the other one would be at lunchtime, we would spar boxing. And at 3 o'clock, we would do jujitsu. And then at 5 o'clock, we would do conditioning, body hardening, mobility, and all that stuff. And when that was the best part about it. And I just kept on working. And now, with that, that was the momentum, or at least the hard work that I did in the beginning. And now basically all I'm doing is maintenance because I'm getting old, so things hurt a lot more. like today, my legs are super sore. I did a crap load of legs yesterday thinking I was Shane Coley, and I'm paying for it today.
Yes, Shane loves his workouts. But yeah, I think you could put something together. I think you've got a lifetime of experience to actually have some interesting things and correlate it towards the shooting sports. I'm sure people would buy it.
I'll write it. Maybe I won't. I'll probably just write it and just won't buy it. I won't sell it. I'll just here it is or something like that. This is what I do Monday to Friday. I focus on grip. I focus on core. I focus on shoulder strength and all that stuff. I guess I'll do that. Probably write it up on something.
Or just do like Instagram videos or something. I know a lot of guys are doing videos and people follow that. There was another question here that I saw there. Where was it? This is from Wes, who has to go eat dinner. So thanks for stopping by, Wes, but he'll listen tomorrow. How do you get into the mindset in your dry fire, live fire practice that translate to a similar mindset that you experience in matches? And I just want to say, and he says, or is it just match experience? But you did something interesting in training that, again, I'd never seen before, and I liked it, was that when we were doing a drill with several targets, we couldn't shoot the same array twice. So each time it was new, and each time we didn't have an expectation of how we were going to shoot it. So I like that, how it put us into that feeling. And I also like the fact that you try to psych yourself up into a little bit of nervousness before you did something, before you did a demo or shot a stage, because that little bit of nervousness gives you that energy. So that's very interesting. But so how in dry fire, I mean, in live fire, I can see that right there, Wes, is that you don't shoot the same array twice. But in dry fire, how do you get that kind of feeling?
So, and for me, dry firing is part of. So it's almost like I'm always on phase two. So you would totally understand what that means. I'm exploring how hard I can go. At this point, as hard as I draw, 9 or 8 out of 10 times, maybe 80% or so, I'm still going to have a really good grip, a really good draw, essentially, where it comes together. It's not no matter how hard, but it's pretty much, if I push myself hard, I still get a pretty successful draw, and I don't really mess that up anymore because I've done it so much. But in terms of mindset, I don't. So I'm not specifically going, I'm going to dry fire hard tonight because of my match tomorrow. No, I dry fire the same exact way I did 6 months before the match. I go hard on my draw. Well, first, if I'm messing up something, I slow everything down and pay attention to how I'm messing things up and where I'm messing things up. If it's a reload, if I keep hitting the same spot, I'll make that adjustment according to my positioning and all that stuff, or maybe the angle of my wrist. In terms of anything else, I'm literally looking just perfecting my movement. So I'm not necessarily practicing attack targets. Necessarily like what you and I talked about. I'll work on prep and reset and getting back on the prep as quickly as possible. Sometimes I won't even pull the trigger. I may pull the trigger maybe once out of 40 draws or something like that, and then maybe pull the trigger once out of 80 reloads, because I just want to feel the prep and see if I can control it with a steady sight picture and think about the shot as opposed to actually pulling it. So in terms of using dry fire for mental and mindset practice for match, I never really used that to boost me up. It was just that I know I can draw as hard as I can, and I'll do it again in a match and not blink an eye on it. And the same thing with reloading. I can reload as fast as I can without any hesitation in dry fire, so I should be able to do it in match as well. So it was just one of those things that I'm not going to change the way I do it in match or in dry fire, because I've worked so hard doing it in dry fire. Why change it in a match? Does that make sense? Like, I don't really use that. But in terms of training, what you and I did, where I asked you guys when we were in phase 3, I said, you're an overload. You're not going to shoot the same exact array twice or more than once. You're going to change it up immediately. And that allowed you for an opportunity for you to actually come up with your own target array or any kind of lack of, basically what I look at it is a lack of walkthrough and a lack of mental preparation. You're just coming up with that target, this target, that target. Okay, that's the array I'm going to shoot right now. Okay, here we go. And the more you do that, the more you kind of essentially mentally conditioning yourself for the match, because now you're reacting to what you think is coming up in the next position. So, for instance, how this ties into the field course or together is that you walk through the field course initially and spine all the targets, and then the next thing you come up with a plan, and then right before, when you load and make ready, right before the buzzer goes off, you draw that gun, you go run to that position. You're literally identifying, like as if you were just standing there going, this target's going to be, this array is an attack, control. You're going to run up to the position, and you've already made up your mind without trying to think of how to shoot it. You just came up with it because you did it several times in overload and in your practice. So you just go over there and react. Once you see a target and trigger, you're reacting correctly. Attack, you're just using your sights. You get a couple of controls, you're using your sights, and you trigger. And then you move to the next position. It's an immediate quick thought of going, all right, this is the array. My first array is going to be a partial target, and it's going to be control, attack, whatever it may be. And then you come in there, and then you're reacting to that. So that's kind of how and why I programmed it the way I programmed it to you guys, where you are not allowed to shoot the same exact thing over and over, because that's kind of like a false sense of security or false sense of confidence that you're going to gain, and setting yourself up for failure essentially for the match. Whether good or bad, you got to move on to the next stage. I'm not allowing you to shoot it. You should have done that in phase 2, because you're exploring, right? There's no time for that in phase 3. You got to learn how to just dial it down and shoot what within your capability and be boring the entire practice.
Yes, it was interesting, that whole evolution, especially on that second day. one of the guys from the class, Wally, couldn't make the YouTube, so he sent a question, and it's you want to thank you for the class, but in USPSA, when do you focus on speed more than points, or points more than speed? Which is kind of an interesting question.
It it really is. It's a battle, right? I'm always like, all right, just be accurate, just be accurate. But then there's stages where speed weighs heavier or scores you more points than actually being accurate. And it's very, I don't think it's as much in production or in minor shooting. It happens a lot more in major where I will make a decision going, yep, I'm more than willing to give up a few points here. Not a lot, but a few points here to push my shooting a little bit. I'm not gonna care too much. Um, I'm just gonna focus on pulling the trigger as fast as I can, not really getting a good sight picture. I'm just gonna hit the target. Anywhere brown is what I'm gonna go for. And as long as I can gain maybe a second or two or something like that on the guy that I'm chasing or the current stage winner, that's my goal. And a lot of times the only reason why I do that is when hit factors are high in the 9 and above. That's when I really crank up the speed a little bit more on it. Or I'll do a quick calculation on the side and go, what happens if I do this for less than a second, but I give up 10 points, but then I dial it down. What happens if I lose a second and I only shoot 3 or 4 points down? And what's the point difference there? What am I giving and what am I taking?
GJ, I think it's the same GJ, wants to know that he said after the class, he shot a match and realized that he doesn't look at the targets the same anymore. Interesting. He said it's control and attack targets, somewhat dictated by the buildup of a plan followed by movement. And he wants to know, is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
That means your training stuck with him.
Yeah, that's super cool because I told you guys, right? If you're doing correctly the attack control and you're following it all that, and then you shoot the right rhythm, you know exactly the rhythm, the numerical number, and all that stuff. You do it correctly, it'll catch my attention whether I'm walking the stage paying attention to you or not. And usually a lot of times when that happens, it's either a guy that's figured it out accidentally or intentionally, or it's a student of mine that's trying to apply it. And as long as he's following the rules with the attack target being sights and then the control target sights and trigger, he's going to have a very successful match. And he's going to, or at least that stage, and he's going to have a very efficient stage, essentially time or overall time, because of the way he executed his shooting. He just has to couple it up with some of his movement. And that's why I always say focus on your shooting first and then figure out the game plan, which is why I like the way he ordered that. He said something about targets first, and then attack control, and then his stage plan, and then his movement. Movement was last, because that's once you take care of your shooting and you're planning on how you shoot and engage targets, everything becomes movement, because that's what's going to make a difference between the next shooter, between you and the next shooter.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people in the comments, and I'm sure you can read them later if you haven't read them already. They're all saying the same thing, how much they appreciated the phase breakdown and all these little things that we did. And that's why it made such an interesting class. And this is a question that I hear a lot at clubs and at hanging around the range. Is it better, this is from Tony, is it better to shoot a local match a week or two before a major match, or should you just focus on practice instead?
It depends. If let's just say I had a really good buildup, phase 1 and phase 2. I'm in phase 2 a lot, and I'm no matter how hard I put, not no matter how hard, but I have more successes if I'm not pushing as much anymore, where I can control. I'm able to throttle my shooting down if I want to, and when I push, I know that I'm in a focus or push or speed mode. If I have a lot of successes in my phase 2, and I'm coming up to, let's say, 2 weeks away from a major match, and switching to phase 3, which is overloading the system to just doing what I would do in match mode, no longer exploring, I may shoot a local match to see if I can execute exactly what I want to do in that match. But I wouldn't go there as that's going to be my first day of phase 3. I wouldn't go to a local match. I would have one practice session focusing on 95% or better in terms of your execution skill sets. I say 95% for me because I'm a GM, right? So I have to score 95% and above in terms of my skill set, and I have to operate at that level. So that's why I say 95% of my shots. That's just an arbitrary number. You could say 90% of your shots, and then that will be totally fine. But I would practice overload, and if I'd have a good session there, I would go right to the match, and I would try to execute what I did in overload and just stay within my capability without trying to push, without getting carried away, setting my mindset and just making that decision early that I'm going to shoot within my capability in the match, and then seeing how that plays out. And if I make any mistakes before I even get there, during the match, I focus on all the good things. I'll address the bad things quickly, but I'll focus on the good things. As soon as I'm done with the match, I switch mindset. I focus and pick out everything that I didn't like about my shooting and forget about the good things. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. And
Right. So it pretty much sets me up for a training session of going what I need to work on for the match. So having a local match accessible before a match is not a bad thing. I just wouldn't have it as your last practice session before a major match.
But so what if you go to two local matches and in both of them you do some major screw up stuff and you come in like almost last place, or you zero out two stages, and now you're going into a major match with those two losses behind you? I mean, you have a lot of experience in competition. Do you think that's a good way to go into a match?
Yeah. So I don't know how to. The way I would say that is that I'm not really focused on my results, right? I could be 50% in a match. If I'm trying things out, I'm more focused about my performance, on what I was trying to accomplish. I was trying to shoot on a move on certain targets that I shouldn't be, or I was trying to push on a control target that I shouldn't have. Depending on what my goals were for the match, I will focus more on those and make adjustments according to that, not according to my results. Does that make sense? So when I move on from that match, whether I'm 10th, 5th place, or 12th place, whatever, I just move on going, I did this correct, I did this correct, I didn't really do this very well. Let me focus on this practice session. But I'm not exploring, I'm just going to sharpen out where I'm currently at. I need to know, for instance, shooting on a move, I need to know how fast I can shoot, not how fast. I need to know at what rate of my movement can I execute shots at whatever distance I was struggling at in a match. If it was 15 yards, I will put a lot of targets at 15 yards, partial targets, and I will work on that and figure out what's my cadence in terms of my footwork. And I just got to understand and feel it. So by the time I go to the match, I'm not trying to figure it out. I will feel it according to me, and I'm going to trust that, what I did.
I guess it would take discipline to go to a match like that and then not worry about results that much and focus more on making it a training session, because I could see it easily becoming a trap where you're like, okay, I'm the biggest hot dog in this club, but now I'm screwing up, and now I'm going against the really big hot dogs. But I'm just going to work on my movement. I guess it depends on the person and how well you can separate that.
Agreed.
Here's a question from Tim. Let's get this in there because he missed the class. What would you say is the biggest thing you've learned from the time you became a pro to now? Or what does one learn on a major team like Glock or being around the pros? I'm not going to say the last part either. Sorry, Tim.
That's a very heavy-handed question. Goodness gracious. The biggest thing I learned about shooting for a company is that there's a certain level of expectations. But you cannot shoot off of that, because that will influence your shooting a lot more than you think. And when I first signed with a big company, and I started shooting, I started caring about my performance. I started caring about my results more than my performance. And it was one of those things that was very stressful to go to a match, because now I'm thinking about, I have to do this because they expect me to do this. I have to place at least top 3 here with this gun that I'm not very familiar with yet. And it's one of those things where you're kind of playing that game and you're going back and forth. And for a while there, I fell in that trap, and it was kind of your performance deteriorates, right? You kind of just go, goodness gracious, your training sessions no longer fun. My training sessions are never really fun. I have a good time when I shoot good, but phase 2, I fail a lot, so I'm not having a good time there. But in matches, I'm going there with an added level of stress. And now the sweet spot that I talk about in class, where I like to be a little bit nervous, but not too much and not too relaxed. That medium point, I start to forgo that because I'm thinking about, should I lay up on this stage because I just want to save points? I don't want to push anything, or I don't want to take the win. And you end up just playing or laying up and hoping that everyone else makes the mistake and not you. Because if you mess up, it looks bad on you. But if you just shot your game and you shot well, but people beat you, it doesn't look so bad. But there's some parts in the game where you can't just lay up anymore. At this point, everyone's kind of going for it and they're connecting. So you got to make your move somewhere in the middle, and you got to be aggressive in your stage planning. You got to be aggressive in your shooting. But it all boils up from your training. And if your mind is clear and just be confident with what you're doing, I think you'll be all right. And that's kind of what I've taken from it. And it was a big lesson learned in the beginning. And now that I'm a little bit more, I would say, a veteran, I guess I don't want to say too old, I feel like I can manage that expectation a little bit better.
Yeah. It's got to be a lot of pressure, and I guess now you're going to be starting with Beretta. That's why you're showing the Beretta on your Instagram page, and you got your Beretta jersey or polo shirt on. How hard is it to go back and forth from all these different guns? And the second part of that question is, what's your preference?
So I've always wanted to prove to anyone, really, that you should be able to pick up a gun as long as you understand the concept and apply them correctly, the trigger, the techniques, and all that stuff. You should be able to pick up a gun and maybe shoot a few rounds through it and then perform just as well with that gun. Maybe not the best, but well enough to compete. And last year was the first time I had that opportunity, that stage where it was back to back to back. And for instance, for limited, I didn't have that gun but 3 or 4 days before the match, and I was practicing my production 9mm, and that came from Eric Raffel's training with him a little bit. Eric, before the World Shoot in 2017, shot 9mm limited, and just shot a whole bunch of that because that was a cheaper way to go and just shoot a bunch without destroying his hands and gun. So he shot 9mm up till the day before the match, and the day before the match he switched to major load 40 caliber and shot about 50 rounds to confirm a 0, and was like, oh, that's good enough. And I remember thinking, going, this guy who's probably going to be the world champ, unless one of the Bob I thought was going to be his biggest threat, Vogel, was going to pull something off and beat him. And I was like, I can't believe this is what he did. And he's like, no, it shouldn't matter. It's still sights and trigger. And I remember thinking, going, all right, I'm going to try to apply that concept. I was like, I understand the concept now, and I know how to apply them in different platforms. I just need to learn how to take it back or push a little bit, depending on what platform, whether it's open or production or limited. And I just got to follow the whole concept of sights and trigger, whatever the targets may be, it's presented to me. So that right there to me was, it's not as hard as long as you focus on and understand your capability. You really got to know you just got to be accurate for any gun, whatever gun you shoot, you just got to be accurate. Once you're accurate enough, you can play with the throttle game. You can play with the speed, you can play with that. But if you're not accurate to begin with, it's going to be very hard for you to even perform or compete in a high level with any gun. So that's a big thing. In terms of my favorite platform, anything hammer fired, I love.
Like the Beretta.
Yes.
So, and someone asked you see all these guns that are out there now, and even production, you can spend up to $2,000 on a production gun. The guys that can't afford that, is that holding them back, you think?
No. You can buy a Glock. For instance, Glock is one of the cheaper guns that you can, or at least more affordable. I don't like to say cheaper. It's a more affordable way to come into the game. You can even shoot a Glock 19. If you're just new into the game, or if you don't have the budget, I would stay with that and shoot that. And once you'll know when the gun is starting to hold you back. You will know yourself that the gun is now holding me back, and I need to I need to get a better gun. Most people jump that gun a little, pun intended, I guess, a little too soon, and go, I need a steel frame gun, I need a Shadow 2, I need a $1,700 gun, I need a $2,000 gun now. The Bull Shadow is going to make me so much better. Yeah, it will enhance your shooting wherever you're currently at, will make you a little better because trigger's better, the sight radius is a little longer, or you have a steel frame which mitigates recoil. All that stuff is going to make you a little better. but not necessarily a lot better where you're going to see complete dramatic changes in your results. Ultimately, still the bottom line of literally plugging holes in your fundamentals. If you can sharpen that up, you can sharpen that up with any gun. I feel like I got myself really good in terms of shooting a SIG 229, 357 SIG, and I was allotted a lot of rounds, and I just played with the gun and just worked the trigger and the sights mechanism, and with the defensive sights with a really wide notch, a rear notch, I would shoot 50 yards trying to be as accurate as I possibly could. And I knew that if I can do this with this gun, I can translate it to any of my other guns in the future. And I just kept on working with that. And I knew if I can do it with that, any gun, anyone out there should be able to just develop and become a good shooter. And you don't need a fancy gun. It'll help, yeah, absolutely, but you can do it with that. And that's one big reason why I signed with Beretta. Beretta did come up with a really nice gun. The trigger mechanism was amazing. I can't wait to actually start shooting with it. I'm very, very excited. It's mind blowing what the engineer did to the trigger. So, but to me, it's one of the reasons why I'm like, you know what? It's time for me to switch into a gun and see if I can do perform the same way I performed with the 2011, because it's kind of one of those things that I want to prove to myself and prove to people that you don't need an $8,000 gun. You can use a $3,000 gun, open gun, and compete with the best of them.
Wasn't it the story, and I think I have it right, wasn't Dave Savigny won world championship with a stock Glock? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's not the arrow, it's the archer. And I know Vogel does amazing things with Glocks. So you don't have to have a $2,000 steel frame gun. I mean, but we're Americans, and that's the American way, that if somebody has something that's steel and heavy, they're going to make it even more heavy and more steel, and they're going to push the limits. Now we're going to have like 60-ounce production guns, I'm sure, at some point, but with huge flaring mag wells. And it'll just be, what do they call it, like minor open or production open or whatever. So it's the 92X, right? That's the new Beretta that's going to be coming out?
Yes, sir.
And when are you expected to make that appearance?
I believe they said they can get me the first gun in September. Can you want to say hi? This is my lovely wife. Sorry, she's just coming in. Be done shortly?
We'll be done shortly.
Okay.
He's been very generous with his time. So you said September?
Yeah, September for, I believe, both guns. And I'll have the first gun that will come into the United States, which is very exciting. I shot the gun. I told you guys, at least you and the guys in the class, I was able to shoot about 1,000 rounds in 20 minutes with the open gun. Completely enjoyed it. And I shot about 1,200 rounds in about 30 or 40 minutes with a production gun. And I absolutely enjoyed shooting both platforms. The trigger on it is, it's weird to say, but I feel like it's almost got if not better than a standard stock 2011 reset. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
For a production gun or type factory gun, it's unheard of. It's unreal. Even the guns that I work on right now, like I'm in my workbench right here with all my tools. I looked at the reset on a Shadow 2, and it's still about a good quarter of an inch at least, as much as I try to shorten it. This is 1 millimeter. As soon as you move your finger, it's reset. So as soon as I saw that, I said, that's what it's all about. And it's got a really crisp break. So I was like, yeah, I can run with that gun.
So
with
guys,
no tuning.
And no tuning. That's what people want. They don't want to have to get their gun and then spend another 6 months at a gunsmith to a year. So anyways, guys, we're going to have to wrap it up, and I'm going to let JJ go because he still has family things to do, and it's very nice of him to spend a good hour of his day talking to all of us. If you still have questions for JJ, you can leave them in here, and if he can't respond, I think he can respond to them, or just hit him up on Instagram. Instagram's your primary method of communication?
Yes, Instagram, or even this. I think I recently started trying to do YouTube stuff, so I can reply if I see comments in there. I'll reply. But Instagram, I'm fairly active in. Facebook, I'm hit or miss. But yeah, Instagram, I can respond as much as I can. Just be patient because I get like 50 messages or so a day. So sometimes I forget to check it, and then by the time I check it, there's like over 100. So I'll just wait and then slowly work my way through.
And if you want to take a class with JJ, you go to his website. Someone said that They're pretty much all full, but you can email Jessica and get on a wait list and hopefully get in. And just pay attention. Another class might open up here or there. But JJ, your sponsors are Beretta. Who else you want to mention?
Yeah, Beretta and Armscore are my main sponsors right now. It's Armscore Ammunition. They're the really two big sponsors that I have. I try to keep it minimal, so I don't really have any other major unless I'm forgetting somebody, which is terrible.
And guys, be sure and like JJ's Instagram page and give him the support. And also, if you can, hit subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'll be getting back to doing much more content. And of course, every week you got the Firearms Nation podcast. Find it. This will be audio replayed on the podcast as well. So if you're a person that wants to hear it while you're driving or working out, do it. And as always, get out there and get some training, study from someone like JJ, and be safe. Thanks for coming by tonight.